Collective. This is Patty Hager, your host for today. So we're going to go ahead and kick it off. I want to welcome everyone to the PreSales Collective session on one of my most favorite topics, tangible tips for becoming a trusted advisor. I am Patty Hager, and I lead the North America pre-sales team for Lenovo. And in fact, I believe in the importance of being a true advisor is one of the most essential things for a pre-sales professional, that I put it in my team's name. So we are technical client advisors at Lenovo. So thank you all for joining. This session is going to impart some knowledge on how to become a trusted advisor. We know it's not always easy to do, and we have three very seasoned panelists that are going to share their perspectives. We'll be providing during the webinar practical tips and advice that you can apply in your role of pre-sales professionals. We want to first introduce a little bit of the mission statement before I push it over to the panelists to introduce themselves. So let me go ahead and reiterate for those of you that may not have joined many events before, the PreSales Collective, the main charter of the organization is to elevate the role of pre-sales. It is a worldwide organization, and it also does a lot of different events, webinars, book clubs, sessions in your local areas. It has an amazing hub and Slack channel, which we'll be getting into at the end of the session, just to reiterate how you can go and leverage that channel. But I can tell you, I've been a member for 3 years now, and it is one of the most insightful groups. Anytime I'm challenged with questions, want to run it by other leaders, the response rates are fabulous. The inputs and creativity across this entire universe of pre-sales people has been great. So super excited to have you here today. All right, so we're going to start out with a quick poll. And the poll is basically asking which option best describes your current role. If you can go ahead and pop that into your response there. Excellent. And while you're doing that, just a couple of reminders. We do not want this to be one-way dialogue. We want to get questions in the Q&A function during the session. And please be active in the chat. And I would love to, at this point, now that we've orchestrated the poll, I'd like to go through and have the panelists, our esteemed panelists, introduce themselves and a little bit about, where are you at today? Is it sunny? Is it cloudy? And tell us a little bit about your role and your organization. So I'll start from left to right, and I'll start with you, Tom.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Banton. I am the Vice President of Solutions Engineering at Eightfold AI. I am currently in a white room in our corporate headquarters in Santa Clara, California, where people were freaking out because there were puddles on 101 today with the rain. So, but I'm normally in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where puddles are an everyday existence. At Eightfold, we use artificial intelligence to help companies recruit, retain, hire diverse talent. It's a very, we call it a talent intelligence platform, and it's a lot for a pre-sales person to actually present. And we work mainly with HR companies and public sector companies.
Thank you, Tom. And sorry you had to navigate that rain this morning. Let's move it over to Achint.
Amazing, and good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Achint Sehgal. I'm located in sunny Atlanta, Georgia. Beautiful weather outside today, and looks like a great upcoming weekend to just step outside. I serve as the Director of Solution Engineering for Americas at OneTrust. And OneTrust is a privacy, security, and governance company that organizations use to become a trusted organization, basically. And what we're talking about today, becoming a trusted advisor, is a topic that's close to my heart, very, very passionate about it, and excited to chat with everyone today.
Thank you, Achint. Julian, let's hear from you.
Perfect. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night. My name is Julianne Tajuba, and I'm also calling in from my home office here in Atlanta, Georgia. I am currently the head of solution engineering for our commercial segment here in North America for Imparticle. And here at Imparticle, we have created a customer data platform that helps customers solve the data chaos problem. So we endeavor to help people be able to move data throughout their business in an organized and intelligent fashion. So I'm happy to be here.
Fabulous. Well, thank you all panelists. We'll go ahead and start the conversation with, guess what? A question about the definition of trusted advisor. What does trusted advisor mean to you? Julian, I'm going to turn it back to you to get your perspectives.
It's not just one thing. I actually took a note and wrote down a few, I think, important characteristics that a trusted advisor, in my opinion, should have. You should be really good at actively listening. You should be incredibly curious, knowledgeable about your product, the industry, the types of problems your customers are trying to solve. You should be wildly empathetic, because it sucks to have problems that seem unsolvable. And then you should have a desire to help. When you master those things, I think you become an incredible trusted advisor.
Excellent. I love the part about listening first. Really super critical. Tom, your perspectives.
First off, I have to give props to wildly empathetic. I'm going to use that one because that's perfect. It's interesting. I asked my team what trusted advisor meant to them, and some people thought we were asking about being a trusted advisor to sales or a trusted advisor to the customer. So I do think that we have to become it to both, and it's a different skill set. But today we'll focus on customer. I mean, I think the key is, as Julian said, active listening, empathetic, and anything you can do to say, hey, I relate to what you're going through, especially you have similar industry experience or similar role experience. And you can put yourself in their shoes and again, try to understand, what they're going through before you start trying to position your product. It's all about listening, as she said, as Julianne said.
Yep. Achint, what else would you add?
Yeah, when I think about trusted advisor, I break it down: trusted and an advisor. And trusted is somebody who can establish themselves as a reliable person, a reliable resource, whether it's to the internal sales teams, whether it's to the prospects or customers. And I think it's one thing that sticks out is it's mutually exclusive from the solution or the product that we are selling. It has nothing to do with that. And the advisor part of it is somebody that becomes credible. I know the industry, I know the market, and someone who does things at the time they're going to say they're going to do it, and they bring in the best practices. They learn from people around them. So I think it's the combination of those two things that, I would say, in addition to what Tom and Julian already said.
Yes, thank you for that. And that actually segues nicely into the next question, which I'm going to throw back to you, Achint, is, being an advisor is shifting the focus to more of what the buyer wants versus what you're selling, right? Yes, we all have financial goals for a corporation, but it's about the buyer. So how do you tailor your message to the individual buyer needs?
Yeah, one of the ways I think about this is solution or sales or, sales engineers have to be multilingual. All that means is, we're talking technical prowess to a technology person. We're talking return on investment to a business buyer. We're talking about organization-wide values to somebody that's going to make a decision. So to shift that focus from what the buyer wants versus what I'm selling, there's a few tactical ways. The first is a language shift. So when I'm talking to somebody, I want to talk in their language. I want to understand, right? Do they call their customers as customers? Do they call them consumers? Do they call them stakeholders? So it creates this hyper personalization in language itself. I think the second thing, which is very, very fundamental, is to understand why is somebody looking for a solution, right? Why are they looking for what we're maybe selling in the market? And what is it that it solves for them? It's not necessarily a product or a feature. It's more about what's the business issue they're solving. And honestly, a lot of times when people purchase products and softwares and other things, they're also trying to elevate their level in the organization by implementing those things. So it's important to understand what's at stake for the other person. And tactically, I use examples like I'll say, hey, what I hear other customers say is X, Y, and Z, and relate it back to the business. So I think it's about a little bit of language shift and personalizing that to the customer, understanding what's important to them, and then being able to repeat things back in customer terms and what we have learned from the market.
Yeah, some excellent thoughts there. Tom, what else do you have to add to that? What have you seen?
I mean, the only thing else I can add on to what Achint said, because that was all perfect, was sometimes when we talk to customers, we like to talk to them in groups. And if we can talk to them one-on-one and try to schedule time with them individually, you can now learn not only what's important, to the company, but to that person personally. What is their motivations for trying to do this? And is it, again, so we sort of talk about, different levels of pain or commitment to a project. So again, having a conversation with somebody one-on-one and being able to talk about the experiences of your customers or your past experience is like a good way to build that trust to people on an individual level. Then they come together for a group, they'll actually trust you as a whole entire group.
Yeah, and so a lot of the themes I'm hearing, also is around integrity, right? And making sure that you think about being honest with your clients and positioning your products in the best way. They may state a requirement that, some of our products and services don't fulfill, right? And it's all about being very trustable with our clients. So Julian, what's your perspective there?
I think there's multiple perspectives you should take. So externally, when you're talking with your prospects and you recognize that maybe you don't have the capability to solve one of their problems, you should be honest, but you should also be curious. How painful is this? Is this something that needs to be solved today? Is it something that needs to be solved 6 months from now, a year from now? What are they doing to alleviate that pain today? And so being curious to uncover more information is always really important, while keeping in mind maybe what your company's product roadmap is. Internally, you should always be honest, because when you hand off your customers to your customer success organization, you want to make sure you're setting your internal business partners up for success. So if you misled a customer and a prospect, you're not putting your business partners in a good position to be successful and enjoy their work with customers as well. So I think it's a balance of being honest, being curious, and being mindful of all the stakeholders involved.
Yeah, you're bringing up a very good point with respect to turning it over to customer success managers. Like, one of my least favorite statements ever is don't confuse implementation with sales. It's like, what? The customer is buying something of value from you. You need to deliver. Uber important. Achint, anything else to add to this?
I think Julian covered it. The only thing comes to mind is, we're all guilty of leaning forward a little bit. We're trying to position our product in the best possible way. And we don't want to come off as an organization that doesn't have the best product, I think. But oxymoronically, sales happening is a byproduct of the customer trusting us to start with. So to strike that intricate balance between honesty and product positioning is is highly important. I think the only other thing I would add is if we know, we cannot deliver on something, it's okay to say that. It's okay to, talk about the shortcomings. But in parallel with that, it's also important to take quick action. So if we know we're not going to be able to do something, why don't we go back internally, find out where it's on the roadmap, if it's on the roadmap, and does the timeline align, and then communicate rapidly. I think just the fact that a solution engineer is willing to talk about the pragmatic approach and go take action, again, helps build trust and, strikes that balance between honesty and, selling the best product in the market.
Right. Yeah. Let's key in a little bit to how to build rapport with new stakeholders. And I'd like to start this one with Julian. What are some of the things you do to build rapport?
When I'm on customer calls, I remind customers and prospects that we're here to have a good time. I'm pretty sarcastic. Nothing that I sell sends rockets into space. We're not curing cancer. There are plenty of people that do super important things. So we can laugh a little bit and really get to know one another. And I find that when I start my calls getting my customers and prospects to laugh a little bit, it lightens the mood and we can have just genuine and fun conversation.
Yep, it's all about having fun while we do this stuff too. Such a great point. Tom, any other perspectives on building rapport?
Well, I talked about sort of doing the one-on-one meetings, but I also like to have them show me what they're using today. And then, I'll say, hey, what part of your solution do you currently love? What do you wish you could change? What, you never want to call their baby ugly, as we say all the time, but, but again, what, and then also find out, are they doing something because that's how the company is? And can you inject any best practices that may align to what your company does as well? And now you're being an advisor and saying, okay, well, you're doing it this way, but other customers are kind of doing it this way and seeing these results. Are you open to exploring that? And they may say, no, you have to do it a certain way. But if you can inject best practices throughout a conversation, that's a great way of being an advisor.
So you're talking about kind of challenging them respectfully, right? Sharing perspectives maybe from other top companies in their sector. So, how do you suggest asking those challenging questions without making them feel like their baby's ugly, right?
Well, again, it's talking about outcomes. We're all shifting to outcomes right now. Customers who are doing it with these fewer steps or doing it through these tools are seeing these outcomes. And then again, why are you doing it this way? Being empathetic, it might be because they have certain reporting structures for their company or certain legal requirements. So, understanding the why before you go into telling them how.
Yeah, that's a great point. The why really helped shape the dialogue too. Any other perspectives, Achint? Anything else on that?
Yeah, I would say earning the right or the credibility to ask those questions is very important for an SE. And the way they can, build that rapport and that credibility to ask those challenging questions is by, sharing some of the best practices, sharing examples of how they've seen other organizations, implement a product or solve a business challenge. And if there are external sources and credible sources like market or industry studies that they can point to, those tactically add on to the credibility. So I think being able to establish that and then being able to ask the questions in the context of earning that credibility hopefully makes that process a little simpler.
And just to add one point, Tamara has said in chat here, do we challenge them? I think challenge is too aggressive. It's just, again, just having a conversation about, well, this is what we've seen other companies do. Not you're doing it wrong, but this is how, so I don't challenge them. I just want to have a dialogue. And to that extent, a lot of us use like call tools that, how often is the customer speaking as opposed to how often we're speaking. That's a good way to also make sure that you're listening more than talking.
Yeah, what you're bringing up too, Tom and Achint, is, it's a little bit of that pre-sales finesse, right? Like I've seen some folks do this extremely well, and I've seen some folks over the year take an approach that almost feels like to the client, like, oh my God, you're so inefficient. So I think, I've seen other companies have success with this. It puts them off the defensive, right? So it's just that subtle way that you frame that first sentence, right, can be such a difference maker. Yeah, let's today, as we look at the poll results, it looks like we got about 6% that are interested in joining the best occupation ever, pre-sales. So let's talk a moment about, if you're newer in the role, right, you're starting, how can you build credibility to earn that trusted advisor status when you're new in role? What are some thoughts you have there? I'll start with you, Julian.
This is something I'm actually really passionate about. I have officially been in a pre-sales role for 4 years, but I've been in sales and selling positions for about 9. And so the first part of that was me recognizing the transferable skills I developed because I carried the bag. I've had to sell things. I've had to research and find ways to be empathetic with my customers and prospects. But the second, as I was making the transition from sales rep to SE, was preparation, learning a new language, studying my product, watching videos. I'm a big fan of, I call YouTube University, not being afraid to know what you don't know. So when you recognize what skills you have, then understand the gaps you have and are ready to do the work, preparation makes everything possible.
Absolutely. I always say, like, if you're, in an hour discussion with a client, you're probably spending 3x the time getting ready for it, right? So
Right.
really, really good points. Achint, anything to add on that side?
Yeah, I also see in the chat window, Stephen has a question around what kind of research do you conduct prior to these calls? And that's part of building credibility. Really understanding, for just as an example, if you're going to go talk with a public company, you can pull down their 10K report and you can understand what are the top level business objectives that this organization has, and then understand what you're selling, how that connects to organizational goals. So that's one part of thinking about the kind of research that you can do. The other side of it is understanding the audience. So whether it's a technical audience, it's the business audience, it's external parties that are involved as part of that, it's important to understand what's the role that everyone's playing, and that goes into research. The other thing is, if you're new in the role and you're building credibility, part of building credibility is that integrity we talked about. None of us are going to know the responses to everything that comes up on a call. That's just not the case. Let's set that straight. So it's okay to say, if you don't know about something, it's okay to say that. And we build credibility by finding the correct responses, sharing them back in a timely fashion. If I say I'm going to share that back with the customer by end of the day, guess what? I'm going to do it by the end of the day. And being newer in the role, that's part of how you build credibility as well.
Yeah, and one thing to add, and this was not planned, Stephen Timmy asked this question. This is a book literally the side of my workstation every day, Insight-Led Selling, which was actually authored by Stephen Timmy and Melody Ashley, but it talks about a lot of the techniques around investigating the business, right? Looking at the 10K, looking at the annual report, the shareholder letters, all those things to make sure you're contextualizing things properly. But what if you're a pre-sales person and now you've hopped to a completely new industry, right? That you may not know, because oftentimes we switch industries, right? I've done that so many times in my career. How do you start to build that credibility in the industry? Tom, I'll start with you on that.
So I just did this. I've been in essentially quote to cash sales software for my whole career. And now all of a sudden I find myself in HR software, which if anybody knows either world, it's completely different. And the first thing I did is I just went out to my personal network of both friends and colleagues that I knew were HR professionals. And I just said, can I grab 10, 15, 20 minutes of your time? I'd like to show you this, product that I'm now prepping. And I learned the speak from them. And I think the most important thing was I got really excited by them getting really excited as to what I was showing them. And now I can say, oh, well, I was having this conversation with an HR professional or a recruiting professional, and these are the things that they really liked about our solution. So that was the first thing I did, and it was great. So we all have networks of friends, and sometimes it's a neat way to actually find out and have a professional colleague with somebody that is, is again a casual acquaintance. And I didn't have anybody say, no, I don't have time to help you. They all jumped in. So that was the first thing I did.
That's fantastic, Tom. And, just going to school on your network is such an important thing to think through as you're shifting gears. Julian, other than YouTube University, right, which I'm a big proponent of as well, what other things would you suggest when you're trying to learn industries?
I could speak about this for hours. So you could do the really expensive thing and go get an MBA. I have an MBA because I wanted some credentials and credibility and concrete knowledge to sharpen my business acumen. But you can read books. I'm obsessed. Like I have bookcases full of books. The 10-day MBA was a fantastic book when I was just trying to understand the different departments in a business. I think asking people and being really curious and vulnerable, like Tom suggested, is great. Doing your research, listening to podcasts. I love podcasts. I read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal to put myself in the position of the people that I'm going to be speaking with. And I also go after trade information. So if I know I have to talk to a CIO, McKinsey's and Accenture's write white papers all the times about the things that CIOs care about. I'm a researcher by nature. I was a scientist before I became an SE. And so this goes back to the idea of preparation. So however you learn, do you watch videos? Do you listen to people talk? Do you read? Just get after it.
Yeah, absolutely. One other tip that I can share with you all that I've used is when you look at, especially if it's a public company, and you look at what the analysts are saying, the analysts who are on the earnings call and the questions they're asking, I think it really helps you understand what the public might be concerned about. And if you can map your solution to concerns that are maybe affecting the share price, the multipliers, et cetera, that can be a great way to, target your strategy as well. Excellent. Well, let's talk about ways you can show value to buyers instead of the kind of traditional 20 questions. Let's start with Tom on this one.
We have a value consulting team. I think more and more companies have that, and it is part of the pre-sales team. So we can do a couple things. We can bring them out to do a full ROI value business case study on their specific problems, and they can have that team help train my SEs as to how to inject value into the demo. Or again, have even the value consulting team just help us with like demo scripts. And these are the value points that we've seen in other customers. But it is all about the value and the ROI and the outcomes. And we're now taking that same value consulting team and going into past customers as opposed to future customers. So I strongly encourage people to have value consulting be part of their pre-sales network.
I've worked for companies that have had that, wholeheartedly agree. It's all about the numbers, right? When they're doing trade-offs, do I invest with your software or do I do another project? So yeah.
And the only thing I'll add is just that having a separate person, like if I'm an SC and I'm talking numbers and tech, it might, people might be okay with that, but having somebody whose sole function is just value, you're going to believe that person more. And they do speak a different language. They're way more detail oriented than I'll ever be. So.
Right. I think you find a lot of those folks like former management consultants. The person that I worked with in the past, Dartmouth MBA, deep financial acumen, like it is unique. Achint, do you have any suggestions on the value side?
Yeah, there's a couple of on-the-ground practices which seem to work well, depending on the audience that we're selling to. A lot of times, if I'm selling to, let's say, the legal audience, or I'm selling to the sales audience, I might try to connect them internally with somebody within my organization that's in a similar role. Right now, that's a little outside of the core sales process, but it essentially gives them value instantly to learn from a peer in the industry. So in addition to customer examples and the ROI, if we can actually connect them to appropriate resources that are facing the same challenges, and they can empathize kind of together in that sense, I think that gives them tremendous value as well. If I'm in a conversation with a customer, oftentimes I'll just seek permission and say, may I start the conversation by just showing you publicly available examples of what you're looking to do and accomplish. And I've never found anybody to say no to that. And I can always use that as an opportunity to show them live examples of having deployed the software, what the North Star looks like. Now, I haven't even taken them through the product, but I've shown them what's the end state of where they can get to. And that seems to open the door to making the demo and the discovery during the demo more conversational, because then I can figure out what specific strategic places during a demo am I going to pause in, and then maybe ask for feedback or realign, and then maybe paint a picture of the current state and the future state. So I think those two things additionally support creating value for the buyers.
Yeah, you bring up a point that I have really leveraged a lot in my multi-decade pre-sales career is buyers over here, right? It's their current state, and we are the bridges to the future state. And as much as we can paint the picture of what the tool, whether it's software, hardware, services will look like in their world, and show through a myriad of customer examples, you're there, right? So that is fabulous. All right, I want to kind of pivot to, it's been kind of an underlying theme all through this talk is, how the trusted advisor approach makes us work more strategically with our clients. But, what are some ways to be more strategic in the sales cycle instead of just being reactionary? Julian, I know we've talked about some, but what other perspectives do you have on that?
I have a few. One, I think it's really hypercritical for all pre-sales professionals to realize we're in sales. So do you understand the sales process? Are you using Medic? Are you using Banton? I'm obsessed with sales strategy and psychology. So I think it's really important to be very grounded in that. The second is relying on your experience and knowledge. Both the other panelists have hinted at this. When you understand an industry and you know what previous customers have done, you can speak very confidently about where things are going. So you can make suggestions and help a prospect through this journey connect the dots and be that bridge like you just described from where you're at today to these outcomes that allow you to be the superhero for your organization because you solve whatever problem. So it's really about piecing all of the things we've discussed today together. But I think it's fundamentally grounded in understanding your sales process and the psychology of the people that you'll be engaging with.
That psychology piece is really cool. I actually, I've taken the DISC profiles before, and we've kind of brainstormed as an account team, like, what do you think this, person at the account is? Are they a D? Are they an I, an S? And, it kind of helps you kind of figure out also how you might pair people up at dinner or, as they're chatting. So really interesting stuff. Achint, what about you?
Yeah, on the ground, SEs a lot of times feel like we are the third wheel in a sales cycle. We're just not. We're equal part of the sales cycle, and owning the sales cycle that way makes for an enriching experience. A lot of times I find, we're communicating over email or chat with customers. And, I find it effective. Just pick up the phone and call them, right? If you're going back and forth on email, it does not matter that I'm the SE on the opportunity or the account. I should feel okay to pick up the phone and just call the technical buyer or the person I have rapport with. And we feel like that's the salesperson's job. And we don't do that. But that's where we can be more strategic in a sales cycle. We can build that rapport. And when you're talking to somebody, everything from the inflection in their voice to the tone of their voice to the frustration to what's not getting done can get set out. And it's important to capture that. And that also helps us figure out, what's their driving, what's the thought process they have? Are they on the hook for something to deliver inside their organization? So I think, that's a tactical practice I deploy. The other thing to be strategic in a sales cycle is, as SEs, we often lean forward into, POCs, great, let's do those. I think it's important.
No.
Yeah, we don't want to do that. So it's important to figure out what's going to make the customer's time valuable and a POC or a trial successful for them. And I think that is a core part of the SE's job and being strategic in the sales cycle.
Yeah, it's such a good point. Both Tom and I lean back into the sales cycle on that one, because sometimes we get so used to what a typical sales cycle is that we're like, okay, well, next step is POC. And it's like, what does the client need to get over the hurdle, right? To take them to the other side of the bridge. And sometimes that proof is not as elaborate as we think it might be. So really good points. Tom, we talked a lot about being a trusted advisor and what components are critical for that. But what could erode trust and completely undermine all those things we talked about earlier?
One thing that is so important is follow through and honoring your commitments. If you have to, if you have a parking lot, you have to address all those open issues. Otherwise, you lose that credibility. I also think you can't say yes to everything. We've sort of darted around this, but I've had people say, oh, I appreciate the fact that you told me no, that you couldn't do this, and then we'll find a creative solution for it. So, and I have had people say we didn't choose vendor A because they said yes to everything, and you were the only people to actually said no. So, I think, again, just follow through, honesty, and again, listening. You just it can't always be about you. It has to be about the customer. Yeah,
so true. I forget the exact quote, but like, you can spend years building your brand and it takes like a millisecond to lose your brand. I'm thinking a lot about that as you're describing those things, Tom. Achint, what about you? What erodes trust? What do you think?
Yeah, I think as SEs, we, or human beings in general, we try to be likable with people, and we'll do everything they ask for as SEs, scope creep on POCs and trials from one demo to the next, to the next, to the next for the same audience. I think that also underpinning, it erodes trust a little bit. I think people trust those people that can also challenge them. So instead of just saying yes, like Tom said, it's also important to challenge and offer to find a solution in a graceful way. And it's okay to say, hey, customer or prospect, how you are describing this is an option. It may not be the most viable solution from what I'm seeing, and allow me to share a couple of best practices with you that we have seen in the industry. So I think it's okay to push back and to not be likable, but rather to be challenging and being a problem solver. The second thing a lot of times is we also become judgmental. And we're judging what issues the customer's organization has and how messy their processes and their tools are and their data is. It's got to be none of that. And focusing on the problem and always thinking about what we're going to solve for the customer is important. So I think those are two things that I think can additionally be thought about.
Yeah, one thing you're making me think of is sometimes what we as pre-sales professionals think is the answer to the problem may be varied from what the account executive thinks. Have you guys ever run into that? So, one of the techniques that's worked for me is kind of going, okay, AE, take your agenda out, I'll take my agenda out. What's a win for the customer? And then trying to kind of compromise and think about the customer first, because we've all had those situations where, but I've got a spiff over here, the AE's like, this is better for my commissions, and you're like, but this technically doesn't work. So yeah, it's challenging. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I want to open up Q&A and see if there's any questions from the audience. Mike, what do you see out there?
Yep. Hi, Patty. We do have a couple. So the first one, a question of, how do you cross that bridge to be a trusted advisor on a call where the sales counterpart maybe is unprepared and isn't ready?
Yeah. Allow me to jump into that. I think it's so critical that even though we know, the counterpart is not prepared, that we don't throw each other under the bus in front of the customer or the prospect. There are situations each of us has run into where that will occur, and sometimes we're on the other side of it. So I think it's important to precariously just balance and validate what the customer is saying, listen, and maybe take back action items from that call versus trying to figure that out, real time with the salesperson on the call.
I'd also add to that if you're doing what you're supposed to do as the SE, you're already prepared. So while it's unfortunate potentially that your sales counterpart isn't ready, if you've done your work and your research and your preparation, you should be fine.
You can also, again, in a dress rehearsal prep meeting, even if it's a discovery call, you should have a prep meeting. What is going to be our signal if we think this is going down the wrong path? And if it's virtual, I'm going to text you, I'm going to Slack you, have that open on a separate monitor. And again, now you're the trusted advisor to the AE, and just say, hey, I think we need to stop and listen again, because I think we're hearing two different things. So do you mind if I take over and rephrase the question? And I'll tell you, there's times when this has happened and the AE was actually right. So, but again, at least we're all on the same page and we're having an honest dialogue with the customer, and they appreciate that we're both trying to solve a problem from a different way. But preparation and knowing signals, and especially if you've got new AEs that you work with, he's trying to put us with a senior person, say, okay, we're going to have this system to the side. And I've even taken presentation classes where you raise your pen, and that means I want to take the floor over. So as long as you have a signal beforehand where I have something I want to say, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think it's important enough that we refocus. And we talk about this, it's hard to put that into practice sometimes.
I love the signal piece. I had that with a rep. Yes. Looks like we have a couple more, Mike.
Yep. So going back to the value consulting question, someone pointed out, they're new to that concept. Would you privately meet with the value consultant, or would you bring them into the meeting?
So you can do both. So our value consulting team will do something called an outside in to help us educate on the customer. Again, what they do, we should be doing on our own, but we appreciate the service. But then we also do something called a one discovery, which in theory is great, but it's very hard to do. But we're going to go in and we're going to do a pre-sales discovery and a value consulting discovery at the same time, because the one thing we don't want to do is ask the customer the same question multiple times. We do ask common questions. So it all depends on how much time the customer is going to give you. If the customer is willing to give you like a day on site, then yes, bring your value consulting, your pre-sales, and even bring someone who's one of your best practice professionals along consulting to come in. And now we're going to talk about how we're going to add value, how we're going to present the solution, and best practices that will help you down the road. It all depends on how much time the customer is going to give you.
I would also add to that, it's a really good practice to just understand the different functions at your organization. You want to understand what value consultants do and make sure you're being a good business partner. So if you meet with them privately and educate yourself, maybe they can provide you with tips and tricks that don't require you to bring them in too early, because you certainly don't want to waste their time as well. So when you're new to the role or new to an organization, I think it's really fair to explore all the different pieces that allow for a pre-sales process to go by really efficiently.
All right, one more. So we're always under pressure to close deals faster. How can we do that while we're doing research? We're trying to build trust. Like, how do you balance that need to close deals as fast as you can with need to build up rapport and research to get that trust?
Superpowers, right?
I wish there was an easy answer for that.
Yeah.
The one thing we try not to do is we try not to lead with POCs, because that's always going to slow it down. So we'll do something called like a hands-on trial, a managed session where they can test drive. And then, we have spiffs to incent salespeople and SEs to close deals faster. It's amazing, and that we just started that, because that's what we're trying to do is create deal velocity.
Yeah, maybe taking half a step back from that, also important to understand where is the customer in this journey. Are they a first-time buyer of the software or the product we're selling? Are they the only player? Do they have the blessings of the individual that's going to actually sign the check? And more importantly, do we have access to the economic buyer in the cycle? So I think the acceleration of closing the opportunities is often a function of having access to the economic buyer. That can kind of trump the timeline a little bit. So as we figure out during discovery and demos, the stakeholders involved, one of the things we want to start doing early on is to figure out who's the person that's actually driving the business decision. The second thing from an SE perspective is to focus the time, because we only have the same number of hours every day, unfortunately, to focus the time on the most value-added activities. What's going to be valuable for the customer in a sales cycle versus everything for every customer in the exact same way. So maybe personalizing the activities that we take on.
Mike, we got one more.
Yep, one more question. So what are your thoughts on the best ways to work with the customer to measure that value delivered? We've obviously talked a little bit about value consulting, but what are some other ways that you can get the customer to agree there's value being delivered here as part of the sales cycle?
So I think it starts with making sure that you understand what the customer defines as value to begin with. So that goes with incredible discovery and really understanding the outcomes that they're trying to achieve. And as you work through this cycle and work with the rest of your business stakeholders, when I pass off closed deals to our implementation team who help guide the implementation process, is everything working like we said it's going to work? If we run into a speed bump, how do we overcome that quickly and efficiently? And then when that part is done and we hand them over to the customer success team, how are we helping you think through what you said was the original problem and potential other things that you should think about, kind of future-proofing what the solution provides? It's a pre-sales and selling is a team sport. And so really understanding what they came in with and what you could do with it once you've solved those original problems, I think is the best way to think about that process.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, one more, Patty.
Okay.
One of the ways in which we'll see customers often put metrics on value has got to be tied to either cost reduction or increase in their revenue or minimization or managing of risk within their business. So if we can point the customer to one of those key areas, maybe utilizing a software helps them do their business faster and it helps them, generate more revenue. Or maybe putting a software at a customer side enables them to do things quickly. So it's a cost reduction thing. Or in general, we have to do things as cost of business, and it helps reduce the risk to an organization's viability and longevity and operations in the market. So I think depending on what you're selling in the market, maybe connecting with one of those things can be a tactical practice.
Well, thank you so much. I am going to close the questions at this point, and I'd like to just thank our esteemed panelists, Tom, Achint, Julian. fabulous insights. I think this is a critical topic. Please be sure to go back and listen to the recording. There's some fantastic tidbits to continue to use. We are going to be doing a poll on how we did today. And while that is being looked at and answered, I want to just again remind you guys of some assets that PreSales Collective brings to you all, which is the Slack channel. So, you know, if you're not using it, go out there, introduce yourself, join your local channel. I'm finding meeting regularly with other folks in the profession, fabulous way to share best practices. Use the discussion forum, give more than you take, you know, run ideas by folks. It's just such a great way to continue to up level your game. And then what I'd like to also remind everyone is to see you next time. And this link will take you to the next events. There are many upcoming events, and I want to thank everyone for your participation in the chat. Thank you for joining, and I wish everyone a fabulous rest of the week.